It started like any other evening segment on The Late Show. Stephen Colbert, with his signature smirk and fast-talking wit, sat under the warm studio lights, shuffling a stack of cue cards. The crowd, mostly progressive and college-aged, roared in anticipation. The topic of the night, Jonathan Roumie, the 51-year-old actor whose unapologetic conservatism and viral speeches had become lightning rods in the media. And Stephen wasn't planning on letting him off easy. He clicked to the next slide on the LED screen behind him, a photo of Jonathan speaking at a college summit, passionately defending school choice and parental rights. "Here he is," Stephen said, pointing dramatically. "America's most articulate actor, sharp suits, sharper tongue, and apparently a degree that no one's ever actually seen." The audience gasped, then laughed. Stephen leaned forward, cocking an eyebrow. "Look, I've tried. I've looked up Jonathan's educational background, some vague mentions of a religious college, but no records, no transcripts, no honors, just a lot of noise about faith, freedom, and Donald Trump." He paused for effect. "Now, I'm not saying he's lying. I'm just saying if I had the nuclear codes and was taking notes from someone who might have barely passed Theater 101, I'd like to know." The audience erupted. Backstage at Fox, Jonathan Roumie was watching. The volume was down, but the captions were loud enough. He sat stiffly on the leather sofa in the green room, his silver cross necklace catching the light as he leaned forward. His assistant Brian stood awkwardly near the door. "We don't have to respond," he said. "It'll blow over." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "No, he wants to make this personal. Let's get personal." He stood, straightened his navy blazer, and picked up his phone. A single tweet was all he needed. "Stephen Colbert, you questioned the wrong man. Let's go live. I'll bring my diploma. You bring your facts. Let's see who teaches who." The tweet exploded. Within 15 minutes, Colbert versus Roumie was trending across X and True Social alike. The next morning, CBS made the call. "We'd like to host a face-to-face. No pre-quests, no moderation bias, just you and Stephen live." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Tell him I'll be there." He closed the call, turned to Brian, and said quietly, "He thinks my education is the weakest part of me. He's about to find out it's the sharpest." The day of the showdown arrived with the weight of a Super Bowl Sunday in political circles. CBS plastered its homepage with a slick promo banner. Jonathan Roumie versus Stephen Colbert. Unfiltered, unscripted, live tonight. The internet had already chosen sides. On X, Team Roumie trended among conservatives, while hashtag Colbert Smashes trended among progressives and late-night comedy fans. YouTube creators teased reaction videos before the debate even aired. Podcasters labeled it the clash of convictions. Jonathan arrived at the CBS building in Manhattan just after 5 p.m., flanked by 2 aides and carrying a slim black folder. The folder contained exactly 2 things: a certified copy of his degree and a sealed transcript. He wore a fitted navy blazer, his hair neatly combed back, and the silver cross still glinting softly at his collarbone. His heels clicked sharply against the marble lobby as producers rushed to escort him through the maze of studio corridors. Stephen Colbert was already in the prep room. Surrounded by staff, he reviewed his talking points and off-the-cuff zingers. But something about this appearance felt different. Normally, he thrived on ridiculing power. But Jonathan wasn't a bumbling senator or a fringe pundit. He was sharp, and he didn't play defense. "Are we sure this is smart?" a producer muttered. Stephen shrugged, half joking. "If I die on stage, tell my dog I loved him." In the final moments before air, Jonathan stood alone in the wings, watching the intro roll across the studio monitors. The announcer's voice boomed. "Tonight, a special edition of The Late Show, a face-off between one of America's most iconic political satirists and the outspoken actor Jonathan Roumie." The crowd cheered as Stephen stepped out first, greeted by applause and a few playful chants. He waved, adjusted his tie, and flashed that famous smirk. When Jonathan walked out, however, the energy shifted. It wasn't just that the audience didn't expect his poise. It was the way he took his seat without hesitation, back straight, chin high, his eyes already locked on Stephen like a laser. Anderson Cooper, sitting between them at a glass table, cleared his throat. "Thank you both for joining us tonight. The subject that sparked this debate is Jonathan Roumie's education credentials. But we'll also be discussing what qualifies someone to shape a nation's narrative." Stephen leaned forward, tapping his pen. "Let's start simple. Jonathan, did you graduate college?" Jonathan gave the faintest smile, cool and deliberate. He opened the black folder, took out his diploma, and placed it upright on the table, facing the cameras. With honors, he betted in political science and American studies. Gasps fluttered through the audience. Stephen raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. Okay, but what did you actually learn? Jonathan didn't blink. Enough to recognize when someone uses a joke to dodge an argument. Want me to explain how? Stephen's smirk faltered for just a second, and that's when the real battle began. Stephen Colbert tapped his cue cards gently, trying to reset the rhythm. He was used to dominating with charm and punchlines, not facing down a 51-year-old who came prepared for war. But he pressed forward, slipping into his signature style of veiled mockery. So, Jonathan, he said, his voice smooth but loaded, you graduated? Great. That still doesn't explain how someone your age becomes the mouthpiece for a former president who, let's be honest, isn't exactly a classroom favorite. The audience laughed, but it wasn't as loud as before. Jonathan didn't flinch. I didn't come here to talk about popularity, he replied. I came here because you implied I didn't earn my place. So let's talk about merit. He opened his transcript and slid it across the table. Stephen barely glanced down. A perfect GPA in political science, double major, Dean's List all 4 years. But Jonathan wasn't done. You mocked my education because you thought it was the easiest way to discredit me. You thought I'd crumble under pressure. But here's what you didn't count on. I wasn't trained by media. I was trained by reality. Stephen leaned back, lips tightening. Reality? You work in Hollywood? How real is that? Jonathan's voice didn't waver. Real enough to sit across the table from you and defend myself with facts while you toss punchlines. The audience murmured. Anderson Cooper tried to cool the tension. Let's bring this to a broader point. Stephen, are you saying someone like Jonathan with his credentials isn't qualified to serve in high office just because of his age? Stephen sighed. No, Anderson. I'm saying we should be cautious when someone this young speaks with this much certainty. Confidence isn't competence. Jonathan leaned in. That's funny because last I checked, you spent 2 decades confidently telling people how to think while never holding any office yourself. The crowd gasped. Stephen blinked. I never claimed to speak for the country. Jonathan didn't let up, but millions took your words as gospel. You influenced elections, ridiculed leaders, and shaped narratives all from behind a desk armed with sarcasm. That's power without responsibility. And yet I'm the one being interrogated. A hush fell over the studio. Stephen tried to laugh it off. Look, this isn't about me. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, isn't it? Because when you mock someone's degree on national television, you're not questioning their education. You're questioning their right to be taken seriously. And if that's your strategy tonight, Stephen, you'll need a better lesson plan. Stephen looked rattled. Not defeated, but clearly pushed off script. The crowd didn't know how to react. A few clapped, some murmured, but something had shifted. For the first time, Stephen Colbert wasn't just hosting the lesson. He was in it. Stephen Colbert leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. His signature smirk had returned, but it lacked its usual bite. Jonathan Roumie had not only matched Stephen Colbert's energy, he'd redirected it. The audience could feel it. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a chess match, and Jonathan had just forced him into defense. All right, Stephen said, adjusting his notes. You've made your point, but let me ask you this, Jonathan. Since we're on the subject of credentials, do you think graduating from college makes someone morally right, smarter, better qualified to speak for a president accused of, well, a few things? The audience chuckled. Jonathan didn't blink. A degree doesn't make someone moral, neither does a comedy show. But if you're going to question my education as a way to undermine my judgment, then I'm going to question yours. Not your diploma, but your discipline. Stephen blinked. My discipline? You built a career by pointing out hypocrisy. That takes talent, Jonathan said. But now you're using that same skill to distract people from ideas you don't agree with. The crowd shifted uneasily. Stephen straightened. Are you saying I shouldn't challenge people in power? He asked. No, Jonathan replied calmly. I'm saying you used to challenge everyone. Now you just punch in one direction and assumed I was too unqualified, too untested to push back. Anderson Cooper tried again to mediate. Jonathan, let's stay focused. Stephen questioned your educational background. You've answered that. What do you want viewers to understand now? Jonathan looked straight into the camera. I want people to understand that credentials are not permission slips for public service. They're tools, and they're only as useful as the courage of the person holding them. The room went quiet. Stephen tried to regroup. So you're saying courage is more important than education? I'm saying courage without knowledge is reckless, Jonathan said. But knowledge without courage is useless. I've seen both in Washington. I chose to bring both. The crowd applauded, not roaring, but thoughtful. Stephen tapped his pen on the desk. You came here loaded. Jonathan nodded. I came here underestimated. Big difference. Stephen chuckled, finally letting his guard slip. You know, you might be the only person to ever turn this table on me. Jonathan smiled, not arrogantly, but like someone who had been preparing for this moment his whole life. You made it easy, he said. You brought a joke. I brought my notes. By now, social media was exploding. Clips were already being cut mid-broadcast. Hashtags like #JonathanSchools, Stephen and #Diploma Drama trended across platforms. Viewers weren't just watching a debate. They were watching the unexpected emergence of a new kind of conservative firebrand who didn't play defense. And Stephen Colbert, one of the most revered figures in political satire, was no longer the one writing the punchlines. He was in them. The studio lights gleamed off the glass table as Stephen Colbert leaned in, no longer smirking. The game had changed. Jonathan hadn't just dodged his attack. He'd redefined the conversation. And worse for Stephen, the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were listening. You came here to fight, Stephen said, quieter now, almost reflective. Jonathan didn't flinch. No, I came here to correct the record. You started the fight when you mocked my degree on national television. You questioned my legitimacy, so I brought my receipts. Stephen nodded, glancing at the camera, then back to him. I've spent my career making fun of politicians. I've earned my share of enemies. Jonathan responded, you earned respect because you exposed hypocrisy. But now you target anyone who threatens your worldview. That's not satire, that's gatekeeping. A ripple ran through the audience. Stephen sat back for the first time all evening. He looked vulnerable. You think I'm threatened by you? He asked, trying to mask it with disbelief. I think you're surprised by me, Jonathan said plainly. You thought I'd be a talking point with a blonde hair and a party line. But I'm here because millions of people, and especially young conservatives, are tired of being told they don't belong in intellectual conversations, especially by people like you. Stephen took a beat. You think I'm part of some intellectual elite? Jonathan raised an eyebrow. You've sat behind a desk for 20 years, shaping narratives, calling out power. You're more establishment than I am. I grew up in a working-class family in New Jersey, paid for school myself, interned under pressure, earned this job, and I didn't inherit an audience. I had to earn every viewer. The silence in the studio was louder than any applause. Stephen rested his hands on the table, the bravado gone. You're right, he said. I didn't expect this. Anderson Cooper, sensing the weight in the air, asked softly, Stephen, what do you think you misjudged? Stephen looked at Jonathan, his voice lower, slower. Thought I was punching up. That's what comedy is supposed to be. But maybe I punched wrong. Jonathan didn't gloat. He leaned in, his voice calm but unwavering. I'm not your enemy, Stephen. I'm not a joke. I'm a product of the country you say you love. I believe in hard questions. I believe in disagreement. But I also believe in giving people a chance to prove themselves before you mock them. A long pause. Even the crew behind the camera stopped moving. Then Jonathan added softer, You thought I was the student. Turns out you were the case study. The audience didn't know what to do. Clap, stay silent. The line hung in the air like fog, thick and unmovable. Even on social media, the usual noise had slowed, replaced by clips of Stephen Colbert nodding silent while Jonathan spoke. For the first time in years, Stephen Colbert wasn't the one delivering the final word. He was listening to it. The credits hadn't even finished rolling before clips of the debate flooded the internet. Jonathan Roumie calmly laying his diploma on the table. Stephen Colbert sitting back, visibly stunned. That final line, you thought I was the student, turns out you were the case study, had already been turned into a meme, a quote card, and a ringtone. Backstage, Jonathan removed his microphone and handed it off to a stunned producer. I'll see myself out, he said, his voice as cool as it had been on air. Anderson Cooper caught up to him in the hallway. That didn't go the way we expected. Jonathan turned slightly, his expression unreadable. That's because you expected a press secretary. You didn't expect a person. Before he could reply, his phone buzzed, hundreds of notifications. His assistant, Brian, was already calling. Jonathan, he said breathlessly, the White House just issued a statement. Trump saw the interview. He loved it. He wants you front and center at the next rally. Jonathan smiled faintly. Good. Let's give them more to talk about. Meanwhile, on the other side of the studio, Stephen Colbert sat alone in his dressing room. His staff hovered awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to speak or leave him be. For a man who built a career on decimating politicians, tonight had felt different. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, running over the debate in his head, the parts he'd rehearsed, the jokes he never got to say. The moment he realized Jonathan Roumie had brought not just facts, but conviction. "She was good," he finally said aloud. A staffer nodded. "You think she won?" Stephen didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his laptop, opened X, and began scrolling, one tweet after another. Jonathan Roumie just dismantled Stephen Colbert with a smile and a transcript. Stephen asked for credentials. She gave him a lesson. "This is Gen Z conservatism. Get ready." He paused at a clip of Jonathan quoting him back to himself, an old Colbert monologue from 2007 about respecting young voices in politics. The irony wasn't lost on him. By morning, Jonathan Roumie's inbox had exploded. Conservative networks flooded him with interview requests. Campus organizations begged him to speak. Even a handful of liberal commentators admitted he had held his own, and then some. Breitbart ran a banner headline, "Jonathan crushes Colbert, truth over sarcasm." The New York Post followed with a case study, how a young conservative flipped the script. But it was a quiet email from his old college professor that caught his attention. "I watched. You didn't just defend yourself. You defended every student who ever felt underestimated. Well done." Jonathan stared at the screen for a long time before typing two simple words, "Thank you, thank you." In the next 24 hours, Jonathan Roumie would be on the road again, this time heading to Michigan for a rally where thousands already carried signs reading, "Educated, empowered, unapologetic." And while the cameras would soon fade and the hashtags shift, one thing was clear. Jonathan Roumie had not just survived Stephen Colbert. He had redefined what it meant to sit across from him and win. In the hours following the CNN showdown, Jonathan Roumie's name was no longer just trending. It was reverberating. Clips from the debate hit every platform. His final line to Stephen Colbert, calm and calculated, was shared with captions like, "He flipped the interview in the power dynamic." The conservative media universe lit up. Fox News aired a primetime montage of Jonathan's best moments. Newsmax called it a generational shift. Even Tucker Carlson, now independent, posted a 5-minute commentary praising his restraint and composure. He didn't scream, he didn't pout, he taught. Capitol Hill noticed. Senator Josh Hawley tweeted, "Stephen Colbert picked the wrong gens to mock. Jonathan's not a student, he's a professor now." Speaker Johnson privately praised him. Kevin McCarthy, however, remained silent, reportedly uneasy about the amount of influence he was now commanding. Inside Trump's inner circle, reactions were split. Some aides admired him, others whispered concerns. "He's getting too big too fast," one advisor told a reporter off the record. This kind of momentum is hard to control. But Donald Trump himself was clear. He called him that night. "You crushed him," he said. "Totally crushed him. Stephen Colbert didn't know what hit him. I want you front and center at the next rally." Jonathan didn't gloat. "Thank you, sir," he said. "But I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I'm tired of being talked down to." He laughed. "That's why you're dangerous. And that's why I like it." Meanwhile, Colbert's camp had gone quiet. Behind closed doors, there was reflection, even regret. Stephen, watching the clips in silence, reportedly told a producer, "He was better than I expected." That wasn't just a debate, that was a reckoning. Jonathan, for his part, stayed off social media for the night. No victory lap, no quote tweet, just silence and a single glance at his reflection in the dark window of his apartment. Not a pundit, not a puppet, but a player finally on the board. The email arrived 2 days after the debate. Subject, invitation, Harvard Political Union guest address. Jonathan stared at it for a moment, surprised. Harvard, the same Ivy League institution where conservative students were often jeered off stage. He half expected it to be a joke, but the note was respectful, formal. "Your recent appearance on CNN sparked debate on this campus. While many students disagree with your politics, we value diverse viewpoints. You are invited to speak before the Harvard Political Union." His aide, Brian, immediately flagged it. "This is a setup. They want to humiliate you." Jonathan disagreed. "No, they want to see if I'll show up, and that's exactly why I will." The auditorium was packed. Inside, the air was thick with curiosity, skepticism, and a touch of hostility. Protesters lingered outside holding signs. "Degrees don't equal truth. No platform for hate." But inside, students filled every seat, waiting. When Jonathan Roumie stepped onto the stage in a navy blazer and black slacks, his silver cross gleaming faintly under the lights, the silence was palpable. No cheering, just a collective breath. He walked up to the podium, scanning the crowd. "I know most of you don't want me here," he began. "Some of you may even believe I shouldn't be allowed to speak, but here I am. Not because I expect agreement, but because I believe disagreement is where real thinking begins." A few murmurs, then silence. "You say you're the party of inclusion," he continued, "but only when it's comfortable. I came here because I'm not afraid of disagreement. You shouldn't be either." By minute 5, the room had shifted. Some students leaned forward. Others put their phones away. Jonathan Roumie spoke not with rage, but with purpose. About his working-class background, about being underestimated, about how he didn't ask for pity or privilege, just space to speak. And he got it. When he finished, the applause was measured but real. Not a standing ovation, but not silence either. He walked off stage alone, no entourage, no flash. Outside, the protest had quieted, and online, a new clip surfaced. Jonathan Roumie in front of a Harvard crest saying, "I didn't come to convert, I came to be heard." That line would hit 1 million views in less than 24 hours. Just as Jonathan's Harvard speech reached its viral peak, a new thread started trending on X. And this time, it wasn't about politics, it was personal. A woman named Lindsay Coburn, a former college acquaintance, posted a scathing thread. Jonathan Roumie wasn't some genius student. He mocked professors, skipped classes, and said once that politics is just theater. He's fake. Don't buy the image. It hit hard. The story was unverified, but it didn't matter. Screenshots don't need truth when they have timing. MSNBC pounced. The View ran it as a developing story. Even late-night hosts mocked him. So much for straight-A Jonathan. One joked, it wasn't a policy debate anymore. It was a character assassination. At the next press briefing, a reporter asked bluntly, "Did you lie about your academic record, Mr. Roumie?" Jonathan didn't blink. He calmly reached into his folder and held up a document. "My transcripts, verified, signed, GPA, and attendance logs. And for the record, I've never claimed to be perfect, just prepared." He let the moment hang. But if we're now discrediting people in politics because someone from college has a grudge, then I have to ask, why are we so afraid of people who speak confidently and stand firmly? A pause, silence, then a ripple of respectful clapping from the press corps. Back in his office, his aide Brian waited. "You okay?" "I'm fine," he said, but his tone was tight. Jonathan Roumie wasn't shaken by the accusation itself. He'd faced worse. What bothered him was the betrayal. Lindsay hadn't spoken to him in years, yet here she was, trying to pull him down just as he was rising. He looked out the window. "They don't want me to succeed," he said quietly. "Not because I'm wrong, because I wasn't supposed to get this far." That night, conservative commentators fought back. "Jonathan delivers receipts," one headline read. "Proof over gossip," said another. Even some left-leaning voices admitted the smear lacked substance. But Jonathan didn't reply online. He let the moment breathe because the truth didn't need a rebuttal. It needed only to be seen. It was nearly 11 p.m. when Jonathan Roumie stepped into the private lounge at Trump International Hotel. The energy in the room buzzed. Staff moving quietly, TV monitors playing muted news loops, and Secret Service at every door. Then he walked in, Donald J. Trump, unfiltered as ever. He extended a hand. "You know, Jonathan, you've done more damage with a transcript in a straight face than half of Congress with a microphone." Jonathan smiled politely. "I just told the truth, sir. They weren't ready for it." He motioned for Jonathan to sit, tossing a thick folder onto the coffee table between them. "This is the future," he said. "New advisory council, strategy for the campaign. I want you in it, not just behind the podium, in the war room." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "And why now?" Trump leaned forward. "Because you're not afraid, not of media, not of Harvard, not of your past. They threw everything at you, and you're still standing. That makes you dangerous to them, invaluable to me." He didn't answer immediately. He flipped open the folder. Pages of polling data, messaging tests, swing state maps. It wasn't just an offer. It was an invitation to shape the national message. "I'll consider it," he said. "You already are," Trump replied. That night, Jonathan walked alone back to his apartment. DC lights flickered on wet pavement. His phone buzzed constantly. Messages, memes, invitations. One text stood out from a young woman he didn't know. "I watched you. You didn't scream. You didn't snap. You made me believe I could do this too." Jonathan sat down at his kitchen table and stared at the message for a while. He had come to Washington as a mouthpiece, a soldier for the cause. Now something had shifted. He wasn't just defending a president. He was defining a generation. In a world where credentials are constantly weaponized and voices are dismissed based on age or ideology, Jonathan Roumie reminded us of something far more powerful: preparation, conviction, and the courage to speak when others expect you to stay silent. He didn't just respond to an attack. He reframed the entire conversation. And in doing so, he didn't just defend himself. He gave voice to a generation tired of being underestimated. Whether you agree with his politics or not, one truth is undeniable. Jonathan Roumie didn't just win a debate. He made history in a single sentence. Thank you for watching. If Jonathan Roumie's powerful response to Stephen Colbert left you thinking, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Your support helps us keep creating stories that challenge, inspire, and entertain. Until next time, stay sharp, stay bold, and never let anyone else write your story for you.